Julia, thank you so much for coming on the show. What an honor to have you. You are a very impressive woman, a very impressive investor, entrepreneur. We are thrilled to have you. Why don't we start with like people, your title, the name of your firm, and kind of how you got started into where you are now?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this. So my name is Julia Gudish Krieger. I'm the managing partner for Pari Passu Venture Partners. We are an early stage venture firm, mostly backing like seed and series A companies, a lot of B2B SaaS around e-com, consumer tech, but set up a bit differently where instead of a traditional fund structure, it is an ecosystem of heavy hitter founders, operators, mostly kind of, I would say like VP and up, if not like C-suite and founders specifically, that collectively are able to come together and back some of the leading companies within venture. And so the seed thought of what we've really created is takes a village to succeed on all parts of life, right? Personal and professional, definitely professional as well. And so I think the more people you have on your cap table that have actually rolled up their sleeves and built something and been smacked around and humbled by entrepreneurship to know like value add isn't asking what numbers are every quarter. There's always a fire to put out, right? And so the seed thought for us for Pari Passu is how do we create the world's most powerful, value add on cap tables, but also allow incredible operators and founders that maybe haven't had a crazy exit where they can put, 250K into a fund, to write much more approachable checks, but into really competitive deals and ventures. So that's what we have built and what I'm very excited to talk more about.
Well, I think it's brilliant. And I think it's kind of where VC is heading. You tell me though. Like it seems like, remember like 5-6 years ago, it seemed like everybody was starting a fund or had a fund or all these various things. And it was very like, so why do you have a fund? What, and like, it was very generalist. Let's say that like a lot of VC, its history is kind of like generalist and you pick deals and stuff. It sounds like what you're doing is like very much like operator focused, like people who have actually been in the trenches before, who have done this, helping and supporting and investing in other people. And man, the value of that is beyond money.
I think so. I think we've seen the last few years with, the unthinkable can happen, right? Pandemics, valuations, bubbles bursting or whatnot. And I think startup founders have realized maybe even more so that a value add investor is important, for when the quote unquote shit hits the fan, because it can, right? So to actually have people that have had to navigate, not just the shiny exits and experience there, but like have had to navigate difficult times, right? And can roll up their sleeves and actually help, right? And think through what's not working and what's worked for them. And I think going through the entrepreneurial experience, it changes you, right? I think it gives you a different sense, I think, of like human empathy once you know really what it's like being again kind of in the trenches and solving the problems and navigating emotional states and all the things. And I think it also then puts you in a place of really wanting to pass along those learnings to other founders and let someone benefit from mistakes that I've made or had to navigate or whatnot. And so yeah, I think it becomes very, very important for founders to think about who they're bringing on their cap table and not just like a quick shiny check from the first person that wants to give you a term sheet and the right valuation, so you can kind of get back to work. I think founders are becoming much more thoughtful about that, and it's really smart to do so. I think it benefits the win significantly and a much more pleasant journey along the way.
Yeah, somebody who you can actually call and they actually have been there before. Like the value of that is insane. It's beautiful actually. I wonder how are you curating this community? How are you curating the app, getting the right people in there? That I imagine like on your end and on like the community ecosystem and app end, that's kind of a big piece of it is like making sure that it's the right people.
Yeah. And, when I think of this curation, I said this to someone the other day, it's not meant to be like a, you can't sit with us, kind of thing. It's really more of the idea that we want to make sure when we write $1 million check to a company and it's 20 founders behind the scenes, that it's folk that can be very value add and that continues to reaffirm why founders pick us, and carve out space and oversubscribe deals for us. And so the thought process of who we're thinking about initially are mostly, like I mentioned, C-suite founders. It's all accredited investors. So that kind of already sort of narrows your pool. Really people that have had to navigate, across all sort of parts of business, different challenges, and have acquired, really incredible skills that they can then pass along. In terms of titles, again, it's like, I don't mind if someone's a social media director from a huge, company. Like, that's something that can be value add. It doesn't just have to be C-suite, but it's really us thinking about, and a bit more of an art than a science, who should be in the fold, that would be amazingly valuable to a company, even if they can only write a 10K check, right? Like, for some of these people, like, that 10K check is worth more than, a fund giving you $1 million and not adding any value, right? Especially a lot of the folks that are operators where, again, they haven't had that crazy exit. Maybe their net worth is mostly sitting in the form of equity. So they can only invest 15K, but they're actually even more valuable than someone that exited 5 years ago, because they're still plugged into the scene. They're still building themselves. They know the players, they know the partnerships. And so that's how we think about curating the community. I also think about it a bit less, for better or for worse, I think about curating the community less in a transactional way. It's less of who wants to angel invest right now in companies. It's more so like, who are the really smart people that are plugged into this ecosystem that should be sitting at the table here? Because regardless of whether or not someone is actively angel investing now, like, you should see the deals that we're backing. Maybe there's partnership opportunities. Maybe there's a potential customer of yours. Like, so many of the people in our investor network are CEOs of D2C, companies and e-com companies, which we don't back brands, but you think of like their perspective on, for example, e-com SaaS, which we focus, a significant amount of effort on, just given our backgrounds. If they don't end up investing in one of these companies, they might be the customers of theirs. They might be able to give really interesting feedback. They may be able to do partnerships. So it's I need a better word for this. It's a very incestuous ecosystem. There's so many ways that value
Right.
ends up being created. So that's how we're thinking about it.
And how does it work? Like, is it structured like a normal fund, or is it like, what are these called, SPVs, or kind of like what you do inside of AngelList? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so it is individual SPV. So the community is curated, right? So that's sort of like one piece of it, right? So really thoughtful on who we're, putting into the fold. But again, accredited investors that can add value, that are mostly plugged into this ecosystem as operators, we'd love to have you, right? I think that's sort of one piece of it. And then in terms of the structure, we're very thoughtfully set up as individual SPVs because once you do a fund, very hard to make it work to take less than, I mentioned, like 250K minimum
Yeah.
checks. Just even like from a regulatory standpoint, it starts triggering things or whatnot, right? I think the other piece of it though here is to allow individual SPVs is to allow the freedom for people to be able to pick and choose what they want to lean into, right? And so I may be a D2C founder and have a real perspective on, this particular space around SEO. Like, I've seen the other players, I know the problem they're solving. Like, I want to put 50K into this company, but I only want to put 10K into this company. And maybe a bunch of companies I'm going to sit out because it's not kind of where I'm allocating, discretionary income. Like, that flexibility generally does not exist when you're talking about the most competitive deals within venture. I think there are a lot of opportunities there with crowd equity platforms and whatnot, where like everyone can put in kind of small checks. And those are amazing. I think the kind of deals that we're focused on are mostly, maybe SaaS and consumer tech deals alongside like literally tier one funds. We've co-invested with Upfront and Sequoia and Sierra. And so it's typically not the deals you would have access to unless you were an institution writing bigger checks. But we're typically the exception because of the bench of support that you end up getting with the people that end up actually writing the checks and their experiences.
This is probably a naive and dumb question, but why build your own app versus like what already exists, like in AngelList? Like, what would be the difference between just, I imagine there's people who like have invested in these types of things through AngelList or other groups. Like, can you kind of explain like
Sure.
the difference between that?
The purpose for building the app, and I guess just to even take a step back. So we've backed 24 companies since December of 2020. Like, average check is around $1 million. So like, we've put decent amount of money to work backing incredible companies. I think the purpose for the app and why we spent really a year head down iterating and creating like the best UI experiences for our community to stay engaged. There's really a need to have a tech home, right? And so when you do
Mhm.
log into this app, once you're approved, which is not a long, weird process, right? Like we're essentially asking, like, put your LinkedIn, confirm you're accredited, we will let you know, right? So not a ton of friction there. And we're also very thoughtful. Like there's not a membership fee. There's not a minimum amount you have to commit to invest a year. Like I don't want that friction. I just want like the best people, that again can back the best companies. And so for us to build this app, it was more so like, what's the experience you want to offer? So if you are building this amazing community and you want them to see the deals that we're backing, but then you also want to customize and see, asks from founders, right? Like to be able to really get a push notification and see like, hey, who knows someone at this level at Skims or at Everlane, who can really help think through building out a sales team. We're looking for a VP of growth, but they have to have kind of like this background. I don't know. I mean, I'm swimming in like emails where I'm kind of drowning a bit, so like to
Mhm.
be able to have an experience where you're getting a push notification for that, like it's such a smooth experience. It's such a great UI. And you're able to really see basically like your whole like alternative investment platform, on one dashboard too. It was a experience that was worth us investing in, and I think as this app develops and grows and we hear more feedback from our community, they want to get together offline, right? They want other ways. Even if I haven't invested in this specific company, maybe I'm open to all of the companies asking me for advice, right? Or seeing kind of the list of what they're looking for intro wise, right? And so that's really the thought of it, to really be a great home to supercharge this community and its ability not just to back amazing companies, but to help support them for that larger win.
I think it's brilliant, and I think, yeah, I mean, the answer is so clear why you wouldn't do it on like some of these more, kind of plug and play platforms, because you are what you're building is a community of founders, community of leaders, community of entrepreneurs, and to do that, you need a platform, or in this case, an app and a technology hub for that to exist, right? Like it can't just
I
be
think
through
so.
emails. My
It,
sense for it.
it's just a much better experience than something living in emails, right? And I think also the way we think about building this community, which is very organic, which has happened a lot through like YPO channels, right? And places where, again, there are already pockets of communities. Once you're approved to be on the app, like you have your own invite code. So it's very easy for you to loop in other people. They bypass the approval process, like to kind of get kind of front of the line. It's just a better, like in the pocket of your hand, all in one experience versus trying to figure out logins and emails and
Yeah.
whatnot. Trying to simplify, cleaner, simpler, better on all
Yeah.
fronts,
How
is the
much of your
intention.
day do you spend trying to remember passwords and logging in? Like that is like a huge part of my day.
I use one password. So it's like if someone like hacks into one password, I think like it's gonna be terrible. But yes, listen, for sure. I think all of our emails are bombarded. And so I've experienced before as an investor, it's like I want to add value to certain portfolio companies. I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, there was an update that went through. What did they need? Like who do they need to speak to? Right. And so I think the ability to have it in a different UI and the ability again to like have a push notification that's like, oh, Sienna AI has an update, or they're looking for this or that or that. It's just a much more fluid, enjoyable experience. So that's how we're
And can
thinking about it.
people direct message each other inside of it? Like they can talk to each other inside
No,
of it?
not in phase one.
Okay, yeah.
But
Yeah.
we can send on behalf of the founders like updates, founder asks, which is its own section, content in terms of, bigger updates that we want to share, not just with, the subset of people who invested in that company, but more broadly with the community. So it's just a lot more flexibility. And then we'll hopefully be doing a lot more to bring this community together offline because there's so many ways that they can add value to each other outside of, again, backing each other. I think just the other piece to mention, which has been really beautiful to see organically happen, is a lot of deal flow then comes from this community because,
Yeah.
these founders are, have their own tech stacks, right, of companies that they're using. And they will flag to us like, hey, this company has been killing it for a conversion for us. They're profitable and they're bootstrapped and they haven't raised. And like, you have to speak to them because if you do a deal, like I want to put money into the SPV. And so we end up having a really, early finger on the pulse for exciting companies because we've really built this network that are all aligned, to support these companies kind of together in different ways. And some of it is capital, right? So
Yeah, you kind of built like this incredible like scout program, right? Have you actually thought about and I'm sure you have kind of building like this scout model inside of it?
yes, we are thinking through the details of that now because there's especially some, really big super connectors that have already just, flagged some deals for us or, brought amazing people into the community that we're like, wait, there's something more here, especially as we think about, and certain people I kind of can't announce yet, but certain, other sectors outside of just B2B SaaS or consumer tech, think defense tech, right? And some of these
Mhm.
other areas where we have very, very strong relationships to like the who's who investors and or founders, that would be somewhere where bringing on a venture partner, a venture scout, something more formal, would make a lot more sense. So we are very actively thinking through that. But the beauty of this community is by default, everyone's a scout,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like
that's the beauty of it. Yeah. That part is really cool. Tell me about the name.
Pari Passu.
Yeah.
So the name Pari Passu, it really means on equal footing, right? And so it's kind of a legal term. But the way that we interpret that is on equal footing, like founder supporting founders, right? Like we are in your court, again, have been in the trenches, have stayed up all night worrying about payroll, like know what that feels like. And so the relationship that I intend to have with the founders of my portfolio companies, which most of them, like, they know they can text me like any time of the night. I'm like, don't worry, my notifications are turned off anytime. Go ahead.
Mhm.
It's just the kind of support that I think all of us as founders, have wanted, and some have had and some haven't, right? But that's the beauty, I think, of this shared experience, right? To have the relationship with your portfolio company founders where they know they don't only have to tell you the shiny things, right? Like they want to loop you into the fold. They know you'll understand that there's, again, a fire to put out, right? Or things to navigate. And that's really impactful because you want to be able to help, versus just get update emails every 6 months, right? And listen, everyone, founders navigate their own insecurities and imposter syndromes and whatnot. And if you don't have the kind of relationship where someone can be vulnerable with you because they're only trying to share like the shiny stuff, like you're not going to be able to help, before it's kind of too late to help. Right. And so, I think that relationship is super important, and is easier to develop with the shared experience of having, gone through the entrepreneurial journey yourself.
What does a typical day look like for you? Walk us through a day.
Typical day. Okay. I would say on average, I'm waking up, say 7 a.m., unless the kids wake up much earlier. And I've definitely had like my three just turned 3, woke me up literally with his head in my face this morning. Hi, I need to go poop. I'm like, okay, it's early. All right, let's do it. Which is always fun. But I would say, typically waking up kind of around 7, really spending active couple hours with the kids. I have 3 little ones. I have 3 that are 6 and under. We
Oh
want all the
wow.
things. We've done all at the same time.
Yeah, that's
We're a little
incredible.
nuts. So really active time with the kids in the morning, which then helps me justify being really, really kind of like work focused, throughout the day. They're all in school, which is great. And I have nanny and help, and it really takes a village again on all fronts. And then, I would say 9 to 9:30, try not to have any calls or meetings so I can really be intentional around my day. I'd also say like I've added some morning routines before I kind of go down to the kids that have really helped me center myself and be more intentional around my day. I think before I was sort of in this go, go, go mentality that like the second you get up, kind of grab your email, right? And like try to get the most done in your day and like work every minute. And it doesn't benefit you, right? At a certain point. So there's certain practices that I've added in the morning. Like I do a cold plunge every
Oh
morning.
wow. Yeah.
And so that's something where my husband did that for years. And I would literally be like, you were insane. And then I actually tried it in November. And once you do it for a week straight, so it's typically like 55 degrees, although we just got a thing that can go to like 39, which I think is a little aggressive. But
Oh
you're
wow.
going full immersion into super cold water, like first thing you do when you wake up. And I swear to you, after like you just feel like a rush of dopamine, like I literally feel happy. And I'm like, wow. It took like a week of not being like, get out of here, you're crazy. And then your body sort of adjusts. But that has been an amazing unlock. So cold plunge into hot shower, intention into the day, kids in chaos. Nice seed thought. And then I would say, during the day, listen, it varies, right? I am trying not to do what I default do, which is have like 11 meetings a day, because I am so interested and engaged in the people that I'm connecting with that I kind of don't want to say no. But I'm realizing like 5 days in a row of that is not the best use of time, because you also need blocks to think
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
strategize and to answer emails and all of the things. So, really full days, I would say, until probably 5:30, and then I really try, unless there's like a fire to put out, to keep like 5:30 to 8 sacred and really be present with my kids. And once they're all asleep, um candidly, I probably watch like TV for an hour or so to feel like a person again. And then when my spouse passes out at 10 o'clock, I probably work again till like midnight. That's my, like, for some people, they're morning people. They're like, oh my God, it's so quiet at 5 a.m. No one's there. I'm like, that also happens at midnight. And so that's kind of like my also time. I know it's not like the healthiest, but I get so much done between like 10:30 and midnight. And that's kind of how I've been able to justify my day of like balancing, not that there's ever a real balance, but some semblance of, real focused time for kids. And for me, that means making up for it by then working till midnight a lot of nights, but it's things that I love.
Yeah.
And it allows me to be present and make up for it later. So that's a bit about how my day's scheduled,
Yeah.
but it really varies.
Yeah, that's incredible. What are you reading? What reading recommendations would you have for us?
There are two books that I'm reading right now. I've actually read both of them before, and I think it's something where it's good to reread it almost like once a year. One is called The Way of Integrity. Let me figure out I think I know the name. By Martha Beck. It's a book that you read, in my mind, with a pencil in your hand and pause and circle things, and they have little kind of workshops throughout. But the seed thought of it is, really about personal growth and sort of checking yourself of where you are out of integrity. And that means different things for different people, right? But essentially not feeling split in different ways. And how do you make yourself whole? And it's going through all of these like really interesting processes. That's an amazing book. And I feel like even 10 pages into it, you pause and you're like, oh, wow. And a lot of what she talks about is also these like 1 degree daily shifts, right? And so the analogy is, if I'm flying a plane, right, and I make even a 1 degree change, it's the difference of me ending up in, Miami or, Timbuktu. Not really, right?
Yeah.
But you get
Yeah.
the idea. And so that concept and that metaphor really stuck with me, of it being much more approachable to try to make these lasting changes in your life, of these like 1 degree shifts daily, to stay in this place of integrity, to stay in this place of intention in business and personal, and spiritually, and all fronts sort of life. So really amazing book I would recommend. So that one's The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. And then the other one is called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. It's the same author of Untethered Soul. And that one is an amazing read. It's also like these 3-page chapters. So you feel like you've accomplished so much. You're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm on like chapter 7, which is great. But it's his story. And it's like this process of just kind of ceding control in a way, more flow with life. The short story of it is, he was a professor, then decided, I'm going to go live in the woods and just study yoga. And then by the end of the book, you'll read this in the back of the cover, so I'm not giving it away. Like, he literally IPOs a tech company from the woods, for like billions of dollars. And it's just this process of him not having like a death grip of control around life, which I think is a very healthy approach to like flow and not force. Like, that shift for me has really unlocked a lot of things, professionally, personally, how I approach like many parts of my life. And so it's a very enjoyable read and a great book.
Okay, I haven't read either of those, so
Okay.
I'm reading both of them.
Let me know.
You sold me on both. That's
Okay.
incredible. How much of your day are you spending thinking about artificial intelligence, how it's integrating into your companies, integrating into investing, and kind of how it's going to affect everything?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like a year plus ago, like everyone was like, now I'm an AI company, right? And
Yeah.
then I think it took time to be like, you're not an AI company. AI enabled is just table stakes for like you're a modern company, right? Versus the folks that are actually using AI, as the core of their offering. And it's something very different than just like a skin on ChatGPT. So I think what's labeled an AI company is changing because again, everything should really be AI enabled in a way. I think on a daily basis, there's definitely been unlocks in terms of, note takers, right? That then give summaries, that then, integrate with your CRM. Like there's a lot of unlocks on time. Motion was a company that I tried that, kind of manages your calendar and puts in tasks and kind of acts like a virtual EA. That's been something that's been really great. But yeah, I mean, I spend for sure a lot of time thinking about AI enabled companies and hearing how they're approaching, different solutions. I think the biggest question that I ask these companies is like, how do you think about defensibility? Right. And so the answer definitely has to be if they're presenting themselves again as this, the main focus of their company is, and the unlock is AI. Again, it can't be a skin on top of ChatGPT, right? It's like, why can't someone else, also raise 500K and do this tomorrow? And so that's where I think, the secret sauce is for these companies that are really taking a thoughtful approach to building a moat and defensibility with their use of AI. Those are really fascinating companies, but there's so much that's happening in that space. It's
Yeah.
really it's a fun time to be an investor.
It really is funny when, a year ago, everybody had AI on their headers of their website. It's just like, we're an AI company now. It's like,
I know. I think I made a joke that everyone spent like $59 on GoDaddy and changed their URLs to .ai and like thought their
AI.
valuations went up.
That's incredible.
They probably did for some, but
They
yeah,
probably did. Actually,
probably
yeah,
did. Probably
it
did.
probably worked, honestly. What are like some key traits that a leader should have? Do you have like three leadership traits like that you've seen in because obviously all leaders are different, have different personalities, different approach, but what kind of traits make a good leader?
I think humility is super important. I think, of course, confidence, is important, as well. But when it goes into like arrogance or ego, like it's such a turn off for me. I think the humility to not want to be the smartest person in the room, the humility to be able to course correct when you've made a wrong decision, right? Like to be able to actually like listen to feedback from someone and not just be defensive because you feel threatened or like it generally takes someone having to be like upped around a little in life and like fail something or whatnot to cultivate that humility. It's not always an easy path to get there. Sometimes life forces it upon you, but I think that humility is super important to be a great leader and to build a great company. And again, when you disagree with someone, like by all means, right? But say like not from a place of defensive ego, right? From a place of like, actually, here's a different perspective. Here's why I think this. So I'd say humility it's really up there. I think someone also, just as a side note, told me a stat that was really interesting that uh, investor founder relationships last longer than most marriages. So be
Yeah,
thoughtful on
true.
who you pick. Oh, that's, I mean, right, like 10-year cycle, right? Versus, I'm like, that's really interesting, right? So at the end of the day, also, humility really makes you a better human to want investors to want to be in that relationship with you for a long time and goes both ways. I think the other one is determination, right? I think as a founder, you have to have a thick skin. You have to be willing to hear no a lot, right? And not get disheartened, especially in like fundraising. You're getting off a meeting where someone says no, and then 2 minutes later, your next meeting is starting. And people can smell fear, right? Like you
Mhm.
have to be able to find ways to ground yourself, right? And to be able to continue to show that determination, if you believe in what you're building, right? And that grit, right? So I think determination and grit are kind of the second. And I think the third one is really authenticity, right? I think the less people are viewing being a leader as putting on a show and I need to know everything, I need to present, right? And much more being authentic in their journeys. I mean, I've seen that even on LinkedIn. There are some founders that are sharing very vulnerable things around like how hard it is to raise or whatnot. And then all of a sudden that post goes viral because people are yearning to connect with someone who's being authentic about their journey and doesn't have everything, buttoned up, and is being real, right? And people are drawn to that. So I think those are the three. I think humility, determination, and authenticity would be the ones that I think most of.
Speaking of authenticity, and this kind of goes into like a broader question around, like, it does seem like CEOs and leaders are being asked to, I wouldn't say being forced to, but being asked to kind of comment on things outside of their company, outside of their business, even outside of their industry, right? And we've seen a trend lately of VCs getting political, which I don't remember ever happening before, right? And so I wonder what you think about that and what role you think like investors in the VC community has in all of this.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think everyone's getting political, right? It's such a climate that we haven't been, used to, I think, historically, right? So it's sort of natural from a human standpoint that that's what happens. I think, as VCs are asked about things outside of their wheelhouse, whether it's politics or opinions on other sectors or whatnot, I would just challenge people to not always have to have an answer if it's something that you're not super well versed in, potentially. And again, I'm not talking just about politics, right? I think, again, my early founder hat, I kind of thought I had to know everything. So, like, it makes you always have an answer for everything. And sometimes it's okay for the answer to be, I'm not really in the weeds on that. Like, here's how I'm thinking about it, but like X, Y, and Z. And I think that my early founder days, I didn't even think that was a viable option for an answer or anything. Right. Like, and I think that's the difference of, maybe some of that is age, or maybe some of that, again, is just life experience. But you don't have to know everything, especially, by the way, for early stage companies. Like, an okay answer is, you know what, that's a fair point, of a question to bring up. That's something we would love your help to kind of help navigate. Here's how we're thinking about it, but we don't have everything figured out. Between the seed and the A is when we're going to figure out X. This is what we do know. And that's a much more, that kind of goes back to humility. Like, that I love that answer from founders versus no, because it's going to be this and it's not, because again, a lot of that kind of answer comes from this energy of like, must prove I know things, right? And I can say that because I've been there, right? And I see like the light on the other side of that. So a little peripheral, but I think like that's kind of how I think about, answering things outside of maybe what your expertise is.
Yeah, well, another thing that I'm seeing investors do in VCs is like become kind of like media companies. They're starting podcasts, they're, publishing and stuff. What do
Oh,
you
yeah.
think of that? Do you have plans to do things like that? Or maybe you already are doing stuff like that?
I think it's really interesting. I think the right kind of investors break through the noise, the ones that have, a lot of authenticity and a real perspective to add. Like, I love Jason Calacanis and all that he's done. I'm like a guest judge on like Launch and some of their founder university stuff. So big fan of what they're doing. I think it depends. I think for someone to feel they should start a podcast, for the sake of starting a podcast, unless they have like, a real passion for it and perspective, on it, and can be really deeply authentic, I think people can see through that, right? Viewers can see through that. So I think great folks break through the noise. It's not something I'm actively thinking about now. But I think, intuitively in the roadmap down the line, like if that's where sort of this community flows, I think it would be something that's additive to our community, because to be able to highlight such amazing people, there makes a lot of sense. I don't think we would ever shift to like a media business. It would only
Yeah.
be if it would kind of benefit the bigger picture of helping this community connect with each other, but not on the short-term roadmap.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It is a big commitment. Juliet, you've been amazing. We end every interview with the same question, and that is at CEO.com. We believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. And you hear that? Who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
Oh, my first real job, which was an internship, was with Insight Partners. So between my junior and senior
Oh,
year
wow.
at Harvard, they back then, a lot of the other venture funds would basically have deals coming from the partners on the golf courses and maybe like a young person in a back room crunching numbers somewhere. And they were really one of the first to flip that model and hire young and hire super, lean and thoughtfully, and give a tremendous amount of autonomy. So I started venture before I could legally have a glass of wine, like at 20, and literally had free reign to speak to, CEOs of any companies that I thought were interesting and loop in a partner kind of the last mile. And so many other funds have replicated or tried to replicate what Insight has done with that cold calling model. Like 80% of the deals came from this analyst and associate class. It was really what like principals do at other funds. And that was an incredible start to my career. And I'm such fans of all the original partners there and have stayed close with a bunch. And yeah, that was really kind of what gave me my start.
Insight Partners, fantastic, fantastic group. They have invested in some Utah companies. I know that they're incredible, being from Utah. Julia, thank you so much
Thank you so
for
much
coming on
for
the show.
having me.
Seriously, what a pleasure.
I loved this.
Yeah,
Looking forward to keeping in touch.